three main factors that affect population size. The first one is going to be the number of births, or the number of individuals coming into the population. Next one's going to be number of deaths, and this is the number of individuals that are leaving the population. And then you also have the number of individuals that enter or leave, i.e. they were already born somewhere else and they come into the population, or they're in the population and they just choose to leave the population while still being alive. And migration is just basically the periodic movement of populations away from and back to their place of origin. We're not talking about migration here, where the organisms come back and they leave and they come back and they leave. We're talking about they permanently come into the population or they permanently leave the population. So irregular movements of some individuals out of an area into a new area with no return, this is going to affect the population size. And it's either going to increase it or decrease it. The first one is immigration. And immigration, like they're coming into the area, is the movement of individuals into an area. This is going to increase the population size in that area. Emigration is the movement of individuals out of an area. They are exiting the population. And if you have individuals that exit a population through immigration, that is going to decrease your population size. So why would an animal immigrate to or emigrate from a population? Well, first of all, you can have competitive pressures on some individuals, and all individuals are competing over the same exact things. They're competing over food, they're competing over shelter, they're competing over mates, they're competing over lots of different things. And this is going to cause individuals to move. Say, for example, the area that you live, there's not a whole lot of food. So your choices are sit there and starve or go find food. And if you're going to find food, you are going to emigrate. You're going to leave that population in search of food somewhere else. Now let's say you were in that place and that's somewhere else and you have lots of food and you have all these different individuals coming into your population because you have this wonderful place to live with lots of food and you have great shelter and it's a wonderful climate. You're going to have lots of immigration or organisms coming into that population. Another thing that has to do with population size is the idea of exponential growth. And if a population basically has all of their needs satisfied, they have plenty of food, they have plenty of space, no predators at all affecting them, and there's no diseases, what is going to happen to the size of this population? Well, they are going to reproduce like crazy, and that population size is going to increase very fast. And there's going to be lots of numbers, and this is called exponential growth. So let's take an example is bacteria. Bacteria, if you give them the right conditions, you give them all the nutrients that they need, you give them the perfect temperature to reproduce, you give them space to reproduce, they're going to reproduce very fast. And they're going to increase their population size exponentially in exponential growth. So bacteria, they reproduce in 20 minutes by splitting in half. So if you have one bacteria after 20 minutes, that's going to be 2 bacteria. 20 minutes later, 2 bacteria turn to 4. 60 minutes after you started, 4 bacteria turned to 8. In 180 minutes, just 3 hours, you have 512 bacteria. And then in one day, 24 hours, you have that number right there. And it starts with a 4, and it's got a whole lot of zeros after it. That's a lot of bacteria in one day. It's because they have a very short doubling time. But again, they have to have all their needs met. They have to have nutrients, the right temperature, the amount of space, all of those different things. So exponential growth occurs when the individuals in a population, they reproduce at a constant rate. And what this is going to do is this is going to create a J-shaped curve. This is an exponential growth curve right here. There's 2 axes. On the left-hand side, we have population size. Starts at 0 down here, and it can go up to any number. In the case of the bacteria, that large number would be way up there. Now time starts at 0, and it goes and increases as you go to the right there. In the case of bacteria, the time is going to be very short. This would just be 1 day. However, in the case of the elephants, they reproduce every 2 to 4 years. So your time on your x-axis would be very, very long, on the order of 750 years. So different organisms reproduce at different rates, but they're all going to create a very similar curve if they have all of their needs met and they reproduce at a very constant rate. So under ideal conditions with unlimited resources and no predation, a population will grow exponentially. And the idea is their growth is unchecked, meaning nothing is reducing their population size. So do bacteria cover the planet? Well, they do. They are all over the place. However, we are not swimming in bacteria. There's no big piles of bacteria sitting around. So it does not continue in populations very long. What happens is they basically, you use up all of the resources. And when you use up all of the resources, such as food or space, your population growth is going to is slowed down very slow, very fast, I should say. And then eventually your population growth is going to stop. I didn't say that all the population is going to die, but the growth of that population is going to stop. So what might cause population growth to stop or slow down? Well, there's several factors. Maybe a predator moved into the area and a predator found all of this food just sitting around, i.e. the individual that was growing so fast. So that's going to take out members of the population. If you have all of these different mouths that you have to feed in your population, you're going to have less food to go around. And if you have all these different members of your population being born, they're occupying more space. Now there's less space to go around. There's less resources, less houses for humans, less heating oil for humans. Or if you're a bird, there's less thing to build nests. There's just less resources. You have loss of habitat too, and disease. Let's say a disease gets introduced in the population and you have a very high population density because of exponential growth. That disease could spread through the population very fast, killing off a large number of that population. So logistic growth occurs, and logistic growth is a different type of growth. It's different than exponential growth, but they are kind of similar in a way too. Logistic growth occurs when a population growth slows or stops following a period of exponential growth. So it creates this S-shaped curve right here. And at first you have this pattern of exponential growth because all of the needs are met by the organism and there's lots of resources and it grows, and eventually you start to run out of those resources. And eventually you have this leveling off where there is no more growth, and over time on your x-axis and your number of individuals on your y-axis, what you have is you have just a flat line right there, and that basically just shows that your population is staying the same. So logistic growth, your population growth may slow or stop down for a slow or stop, and this is due to a number of reasons. If your birth rate decreases, number of individuals coming in to your population and your immigration, they both decrease, and your death rates increase, and the number of organisms that leave also increase. These will stop or slow down the growth of a population. At some point, you're going to have that leveling off, and that leveling off is right there. Here's another curve of logistic growth showing the same thing. Number of organisms, y-axis, x-axis is time. Again, you have that exponential growth at first, and then eventually you run out of resources, you run out of food, disease comes in, predation, organisms leave, and your growth rate slows down, so that curve kind of flattens out, and then it basically makes a flat line. However, you will have some small swings in population numbers, so maybe something might cause it to dip shortly and then grow again and then dip a little bit, then grow again, then dip again and then grow again. But it kind of it levels off around the same exact area. But you'll have year-to-year swings that cause these up and down patterns right here, but there is a certain number where they all basically stay. And this is going to be called the carrying capacity. So logistic growth, after exponential growth, you're going to have that leveling off. And this is called the carrying capacity. It's basically just the number, it's the number of organisms that an environment can support. And if you look at this picture right here, this kind of shows how carrying capacity works. If you think of this barrel right here as the maximum number of organisms that an area can support, and then and you have organisms coming in through annual production, and this is going to be your birth and immigration. You have different reasons why organisms leave that area. It's because it's reached its carrying capacity. So starvation would cause organisms to leave the environment. Accidents, they end up dying. Pollution ends up killing them. Old age, that happens. Disease also ends up killing them, and also predation. These are all reasons, or just emigration, they end up leaving. These are all reasons why organisms would leave an environment. And this just kind of shows how carrying capacity works. So the carrying capacity is the largest number of individuals an environment can support. So right here, if we had a number right here, we would see if it was maybe 4 billion, the most yeast cells that this environment could support would be 4 billion. And that is the carrying capacity. It levels off right there. So most plant and animal populations follow this type of growth. And here's just what they look like next to each other. You have logistical growth in red, where you have that massive increase in population size and growth, and eventually it levels off. But exponential growth just keeps going and going and going. And we will learn later that exponential growth is not sustainable. At some point, the population will crash.